Welcome everyone on this new episode of Let's Talk. I'm super happy to be here with Felix Laumann. Felix, how are you doing?
I'm well. Thank you very much for having me, Thomas.
I'm super excited to have you on the show. I have a lot of questions. But first, for the people who might not know you, can you introduce yourself in a few sentences?
Sure, happy to do. So I'm Felix, one of the two co-founders of NeuralSpace, acting as the CEO together with my brilliant co-founder Ayushman Dash, who's our CTO. What we do at NeuralSpace is that we develop language AI products and platforms. We work on local languages, so that anything in Asia, like Middle East or Africa. We work a lot on Arabic. We work a lot on languages in India, like Hindi, but also Zulu, Afrikaans that are spoken in Africa.
Oh, amazing. I would love to go back on a bit of a retrospective of who you are, what you've been doing, what you were doing before being the CEO of NeuralSpace. But right before that, I'd like to ask you, what are you trying to achieve today in your company, or maybe like personally? You decide.
Sure. So when you look overall at the AI landscape, right? When you actually look at who develops the core models, the foundational models that power chatbots, that power voice assistant, that even power something like an image recognition solution, there's very often one of the big technology players as a foundational layer, right? So that's either Microsoft, and they have some cognitive services on Azure. They obviously are working very strongly now with OpenAI, but also Google Cloud especially has a lot of offerings like Dialogflow, Google Speech to Text, and so on. So there are many products, and there are many companies that tell the world that they are an AI company, but very often the underlying models come from the actual big tech player, and that's totally fine, right? Not everyone needs to work on that foundation layer. But what we do is that we give all the power, or at least lots of the power, who develops AI solutions to the big technology companies. And predominantly, they are based in the US. They have had large customers in the US and Europe. And they really haven't focused much on these local languages. Obviously, they do. Google Translate can do Hindi and can do Arabic. But as all of us know, AI is never 200% accurate. So when you actually use that Google Translate for Arabic, for example, or when you do a Google Speech to Text for Hindi, you won't really get high accuracy. And lots of applications that are built in on top of that, for example, some kind of call analytics solutions, right? It won't work when you don't have high accuracy. And when you only get 50% accuracy of your speech-to-text transcription, any analytics on top of that, on the transcript, won't be really accurate, right? So that's very important, and that's why we want to be a foundational layer that really increases the accuracy of local language AI solutions.
Makes sense. I'll ask you further on about the latest release of OpenAI, which is quite impressive. So I'll get your thoughts on that and how it impacts your business, because I believe that this is a very interesting thing. A lot of companies who are doing work around audio, like deep learning in general, have been, I believe, quite impacted with the latest release. So I would love to understand your vision on that. But before that, if we can do a short retrospective of who you are and what you've been doing. So you've been in the field for some time, but can you share with us like some key moments and how you ended up here, CEO at NeuralSpace, doing what you're doing today?
For sure. So before we started NeuralSpace, I was basically a friend of Ayushman. So we are friends, and we were doing really minor work as students together, but there was not really like a deep collaboration. We knew of each other, but we were not kind of close collaborators. But it was like Ayushman was always very interesting for me because he is from India. He does not even in his house, actually, with his family, he does not even speak Hindi. He speaks another local language called Oriya. And this is really fascinating, right? So in India, there are more than 22 recognized languages, which is just out of a European perspective, mind-blowing, right? So how can 22 different languages be spoken within one country and all be recognized? So that actually probably even more languages spoken in India. And what really fascinating for me, I mean, Ayushman speaks at home Odia, then he speaks officially Hindi, he speaks English fluently, and then probably a few more languages that I don't even know. But then he came to Germany to study his master, and that's where I'm from, and so we go to know each other. What was really fascinating is that he combines that knowledge of language and technology. So we obviously studied engineering, he studied computer science and had more of a general engineering degree, but we really thought there could be some good potential together. So I was always, given my education and then later on, very fascinated by the statistics and mathematics behind those, whereas he came more from the language perspective. I was, as I grew up, fortunate to have been traveling to lots of countries. So I've spent a significant amount of time in India, across Africa, and other Asian countries. So I was aware of that problem, right? Of local language, combined with technology. At that time, phones were mostly in English. All the local language speakers use their phones and all of that. So I then went on to do a PhD in statistics, where Ayushman then worked a bit more in industry. I gained even more experience as an engineer. And then really at some point, we said, like, why don't we actually start NeuralSpace? Why don't we start a company together? Because our skills are combine each other really well. And we were thinking there's a need for something like that, what we have always been seeing and what we have been discussing. So yeah, that's how we started it. Obviously, doesn't go always perfect from day one, but every other founder knows that. But we evolve, right? So you just need to keep an open mind that you learn, and then you evolve. You need to listen carefully to customers, what they actually want, where there's actually a need, and that's how you develop a company, a product out of that.
Amazing. I think we'll be able to get in details about this process of building something like that from scratch. And the journey is very interesting, and I'm really curious to ask you more about how you've been growing this and how you've been approaching these problems and what are the main pains of your clients. Coming back to my previous question,
Yeah.
I think it's interesting because this is a podcast format to like have kind of time related to latest events. So what I mean by that is the releases of OpenAI were 1 week from today or something, maybe a bit more. And I would like to ask you about how an update like this impacts your vision and your business. Does it enhance it, or does it like how does it impact, and
Yeah.
how do you see the latest releases of
Yeah.
OpenAI?
Yeah. So overall, right, we work predominantly on speech and some document processing product and platforms. So OpenAI did release a new version of Whisper, which is open source speech recognition model. So that's obviously very interesting. We already carefully looked at what they call the word error rate, which is kind of how accurate the model is. And we compared an hours, especially for Arabic, Hindi, and a few more languages against that. And for that, we actually see it's good solution, and it's a good foundation. Many companies or many developers probably do on top of that. They try to fine tune and all of it. So that's all good. For us, given that we develop mostly enterprise grade systems, we still outperform accuracy. We still get lower error rates across all languages that we offer, and we have a lot of things built that are really enterprise specific, right? So we have built on-premise installation capabilities, which OpenAI won't or doesn't offer right now, but in the future, and multiple other things. So our customers generally ask for world level timestamps, which OpenAI, even the latest version, I believe, doesn't have. So they have segment level timestamps and lots of kind of features which enterprises need, which an open source model doesn't have yet, or doesn't have right now. However, the accuracy is obviously very impressive, and we obviously carefully look at it and observe the development in that space. Otherwise, so we haven't done, we don't look too close at OpenAI because we are not going to be a generative AI startup, right? We are not going to look at some kind of text generation that is comparing them to ChatGPT, or should be somewhat of a general purpose text generation. We do offer, for example, for our speech-to-text customers, when there's a full call conversation, for example, we offer summaries. And these summaries are obviously based on an LLM, a large language model, but yeah, that's heavily fine-tuned towards that use case, and we really don't feel like anything like that interface, because it's simply a building block on top of the speech-to-text, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, we are very, very happy that OpenAI does so great work. But we don't see them as any competitor. We don't need to feel that anything what they do is kind of taking away customers from us.
Makes sense. I'd like to go back on the journey of how you grew NeuralSpace, and like where it kind of started. So could you share with us, like, when your friend and yourself, at the time, you've been traveling a lot. Yourself is from India originally. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And so you are both very interested in language, in statistics, in technology, and so on. And you decide to create NeuralSpace. How? Why? Why did you go into this adventure?
Yeah.
You kind of share a little bit before, and if you could share a bit of, like, all right, when you said, okay, let's do this, where do we begin? Like, how was
Yeah.
the beginning? Was it a POC?
Yeah.
Was it the first model trained? Can you share a little bit some insights
Yes.
regarding the genesis of the company?
So, yeah, what I'm going to share is definitely not best practice. There are many things that can be done better, but I just share like how we did it.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, why we started? Simply because we saw a need. We found it just unfair that there is technology that can really make our lives as English speakers or even European language speakers significantly easier. Could be, I don't know, could be Amazon Alexa at home, right? Could be something else that makes our life really significantly easier and more enjoyable. And simply because someone else doesn't speak the language, they should go hardship, right? Or they should go through hardship. And this is like, okay, Amazon Alexa is nice to have. You don't really need it. You don't depend on it. But there's an instance which I like to tell from India, where people could book their COVID vaccinations through a chatbot. It was integrated to WhatsApp and already active. But in the beginning, it only worked on Hindi and English. And as you know, there are lots of other speakers which of other languages spoken in India, and there are lots of people who don't speak Hindi or English. So what does it mean? They cannot book a COVID vaccination? That's really unfair, right? So it was for further motivation just to say, okay, let's develop foundational AI models that are very accurate in local language. So no company has any excuse anymore not to implement that for local language. That was our reason why we started. Okay, then we started. We luckily got into an accelerator. So we went through a TechStart program, which gave us a bit of funding and lots of learning. So you have kind of the initial ideas, how you can build the product, how you can build the company. But you speak to lots of mentors and lots of industry experts through the program, and they really challenge you. That's their job, right? And it's very good. That's a challenge. It's sometimes very hard because you can question the fundamental assumptions, the fundamental ideas about the market and what the market needs, and they really challenge that. But it just redefines what the product or the company should look like and what you want to build. So that's all very good. And then after that, we basically built one product which could also used then act as a backend for a chatbot. So it could do something called intent classification and anti-recognition, again for local languages, predominantly for Indian local languages. And that can work really well. So a lot of people used it in the end, and then we got some customers luckily for that. But what's then kind of evolving is that, like at that time, Hugging Face also started to pick up, and lots of people uploaded their model that they trade on Hugging Face, right?
Hmm.
So there was suddenly like a lot of open source stuff available. The companies really said, okay, when I have already a team of, I don't know, 5 data scientists, do I really need to buy an external API, or can I just like ask them to sit 2 weeks together and integrate a model of Hugging Face and then use that, right?
Hmm.
So it really made it significantly more challenging for us to build that product. Which is again, I'm not worried, I'm not angry about. It's more that the open source community picked up, and this is obviously great because lots of more people then understood what AI can do in order to work with AI.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that was first, and then we thought, okay, like what other challenges are there for local language people that we should tackle or that we believe people would have a benefit from. And then we went more into the voice related products and applications. And there we saw, okay, it's not only a different language, it's very often also an accent or dialect that people speak, and they've been neglected by systems. So in the UK, a brilliant example is Scottish and the Scottish accent, right? It can be very strong depending on what region you are. And I spoke to many people who said, well, whenever I get onto an IVR and whenever the IVR tries to understand me, it doesn't really get me because I have such a strong accent.
Hmm.
I think there are many other dialects. So in the Arabic speaking world, there are so many different dialects. Every country at least has one strong dialect. And again, the big companies, the big technology companies have focused on what they call model standardization. So yeah, it's really not that great for the local speakers. And that's where we said, let's try to do something in that space. And then we have developed that and released voice AI, and yeah, have really focused on local language again.
Hmm. That's very interesting. Um, so speaking of the local languages, I would like to ask you about um, if so when you started. I really like how going through this accelerator and like really being challenged by experts to what is your like what is your product and what are you going to offer, and so you focused on this niche. But to solve this problem, how do you go about building models that really understand well and have a high accuracy for local languages? Like, can you share a bit about the process of
Sure.
how can you solve this problem?
Yeah. So you could tackle the problem from 2 different perspectives, and that's or from 2 different sides. And that's how any machine learning engineer and data scientist would say, okay, what you can do is you can work on the underlying model architecture and you can work on the data set. With other, like everything else, what you do is probably an add or the support, but these 2 fundamental sides, um, you can really try to improve. So
Hmm.
we worked on both simply because we were thinking there is room for improvement on both sides. So what we did first is develop an underlying deep learning model architecture that we, through our experience, through multiple evaluations, have believed in the beginning that it will work really well for local languages. And what makes local languages different from English is that there is, first of all, not as much data available. So we looked at model architectures which are very data efficient. Right? What means, okay, do we really need to have 25 hidden layers in our deep learning model, or do we need to have 50 transformer blocks, one after the other? Can we not build something more efficient?
Hmm.
And that's what we first worked on, right? So we obviously have a data set, which we believe is quite representative of what we will use later, and then just iterated, building new model architectures, train on the data that evaluated all the test data that will not delineate. And it's still an ongoing process, but we are very far already in the process. I would say where we can say, okay, we are quite confident that the certain model architecture will work on a certain language back. And that's simply through our iteration and through our ongoing development that we. This is side one, so you work on the underlying model architecture. Side two is that you work on the data set, right? So the data that you want to give, and again, OpenAI with Whisper did a great job on that. They gave it, at least in the previous version, they gave it 680,000 hours of multiple languages or with human validated transcript. So there's obviously a huge amount of data, and they probably spent a lot of money on hiring people to connect that data. But that's something that is out of our possibilities, right? We are not by far not as well funded as OpenAI, but you still want to build very accurate models. So what we then did is that we collect our own internal data sets that is based on open source data, that is based on hiring freelancers that collect data. We have worked with some data collector companies that collect the data for us at all, that we then combine to get a unique data set that is also quite well representative for the customers that we expect to have, and that just performs also really better on open source data sets that are commonly used for benchmarking, right? So we use Common Voice 11, for example, Fleurs, and multiple other data sets. So all of that, really then combined to the model architecture plus the unique data set and fairly large data set combined gives very high accuracy. And this is what we do, what we have ongoing development. So we collect more data, we fine tune, we modify the model architecture in more detail, and then hopefully even increase accuracy in the future.
Right. I mean, that seems like the best two approaches to go, one complementing the other. My question for you is, so I assume, like you said, there aren't that much data compared to English, let's say, or other languages. And like you said, in India, there are like more than 22 languages. So that being said, I have two underlying questions, because this is such a niche expertise to have, like to validate those models. Because even if someone speak 2 or 3 languages, that's not enough to review like the 22 languages that we could try to build model for India dialects. So taking this approach, I assume that you can ask experts, people to review, and so on. But I would also ask, how do you deal with maybe building like augmented data sets? Maybe like, do you use like, what kind of techniques do you use? And further on, like, does the latest model of OpenAI, for example, the GPT-4 model, can those models be used also like on specific dialects? Maybe they work very well, and like you could maybe do augment the data using those models too. How do you see this overall picture?
Yep, definitely. So for the voice data or speech data, we can't really use OpenAI GPT-4, right? Or because it generates text. Okay, you could have then a text-to-speech engine reading that out, but it's kind of giving AI-generated data to train AI, but which should then work on humans, actually, right? So this is very often not that successful. We've tried a little bit just to enhance our data set, but you don't get from these text-to-speech voices, right? You don't get such a big variation what you get from actually humans. So just to give you a comparison, when we collect data, we normally don't want to have more than, of the total data sets, we never want to have more than about 0.5% of a single speaker. So there should be at least 200 speakers always in the data, right? If not even more, that's the absolute maximum. Very often it's like one speaker accounts to 0.1% or less of the data, right? So that each data that are more than 1,000 speakers normally for a language, at least. So what that means there are like you can combine probably all text to speech words in the world. Let's say for Arabic, you won't get 1,000 different speakers. There are, I don't know, there may be 200 different voices at maximum, 200 different Arabic voices at the moment available for text to speech. So it's it's not really worth doing that. You can potentially enhance your data set a little bit with it, and I think we've tried in the past, but collecting real human audio data is still very valuable because there will be background noise, there will be some words being not pronounced as it is done out of the dictionary. So there are lots of things that you don't want to do. However, you can still enhance your data that artificially with, for example, adding some constant background noise, right? So as you speak, we could have, I don't know, some kind of fan going on, right, all the time, or we could have even some noises here and there in between. It could be a doorbell ringing or something, or we could have another speaker in the background, right, which very often happens at call centers when the agent speaks and literally a meter next to her sits another agent speaking. So you have that background person speaking as well. So we do all of that to enhance the actual audio data that we have. So then you can obviously use all of that combined to train the model, because you want to have the model being working well in these scenarios, right? In the call center, you want that it works really well because there are multiple people speaking at the same time. Someone maybe with a very strong accent who's not native English speaker answers the phone and so on. So you want to combine the data doses.
Right. Right. Makes sense. Right. I wonder though if we can push further the text to speech models, because now we can fine tune models to match voices. So if we have different person with a specific local accent, maybe we can like play with that around and add more layers and background noise, and maybe like create new voices from existing voices.
No,
Maybe that could be an interesting thing. But I think you
for sure.
mentioned that don't really work that well so far, right?
I believe it works really well in English. So for a lot of like pre-trained English text-to-speech voices, there are probably a lot already out there. Plus, you have now the what they call voice cloning, right? With I
Yeah.
don't know 1 second of audio or so, so super quick, and then definitely you could do it. Um, that doesn't yet work well for local languages. So you would have someone, if you tried for Arabic, for example, you know, someone probably speaking Arabic with an extreme strong English accent. You would still get some Arabic out, but it would probably be hard to understand because of the English accent is so dominant.
Hmm.
So we still wait a little bit for development on that front
Hmm.
in other languages than English and European languages, but it's definitely a way, right? You can do that still thing like style transfer. You can maybe you even want, right? Especially in English, you want to have someone like me who has a strong German accent to also be recognized. So we need to have data, or we want to have data
Hmm.
for that kind of people as well.
Makes sense. Thank you. So moving on, I would like to ask you about so afterward I will be asking you about how do you um, I mean, the first question that I have in mind right now is about the project and the market, like the needs of the clients and what they are looking at. So, could you share maybe some use cases or pains that your clients face? Obviously, I assume that it is related to getting value from local languages, and but could you share some industry problems that
Yeah.
those models can solve, and how you can implement it, and
Yeah.
how they get value, how your clients get value from it?
Totally. So Yeah, let me speak about voice AI first, and then later we can speak about our document AI solution too.
Awesome.
So, what people or what companies in Europe and the US already do probably since many years is try to get as much knowledge about customers from every possible source, right? So when you, for example, call a bank and ask, hey, there's something wrong on my bank statement. Can you please look at that, or can I show it to you? Da, da, da. As soon as you call, the call is recorded, and then the call is analyzed after the conversation. Potentially, might sometimes even live on the conversation. So what happens there is that the bank wants to understand the problems that customers have related to a certain product. So when it's, for example, a simple bank account, then the bank will recognize, okay, Felix has an issue with his bank statement. That's a normal bank account. Maybe something is wrong in my underlying technology, right? Potentially. So they always very quickly want to understand when customers raise any issues or face any problem. And that has a simple foundational customer experience problem. So what is out of the textbook, and it's not always true, but what people say, when you hear a problem from one customer, there are at least 10 other customers who have the same problem. And these 10 other customers tell at least 10 other people about the problem. So when one customer raises an issue, there are potentially 100 other customers that are informed about that. Which means that you have a reputational issue, but all of these customers, they got, okay, if my company or if my bank cannot handle that, I will change my bank, right? So they potentially lose up to maximum 100 customers. So they want to listen to their customers extremely carefully. Another example I gave you is where there was a large fast food chain analyzing calls of customers. And one customer complained that their child got immediately ill after they went to the restaurant. So imagine, again, this can not only mean that, okay, someone was unhappy about my product, but someone actually got ill from it, right? So there are potentially other people who also got ill. So this is a really, really serious issue, and obviously the fast food chain wanted to fix it as well. And they basically, 10 minutes after the call, they were aware of it and immediately started investigations why that happened. So that's all very valuable insights, and potentially they could then avoid having a newspaper article the next morning about the fast food chain and how they produce food that is not edible. So that's all extremely valuable knowledge for companies, and as that companies in the US and in Europe already do that. But that doesn't happen very often in Arabic-speaking countries, in Asia or in Africa, simply because the foundational layer of that analysis is the speech-to-text, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need to have a transcript of the call, so you can then analyze it for keywords, for some kind of warning signals, and so on. So this is something what we really have worked a lot with call centers to provide the same level of analytical depth to call centers operating in the local language compared to what they already can do in the North American and European market. Yeah, so that's all to voice AI. For our document solution, what we call Doc AI, it's somewhat related, but not exactly the same. We simply have in local language speaking countries still a lot of manual process. So when you scan anything from your phone also, and then you upload to your solution, it can quite easily extract the key information that you want to have from that document, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you, for example, again, open your bank account, they will ask of your previous bank statements, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just to validate that just regular payment into the bank account and so on. So when you apply for a loan, it's even more, right? Or for a mortgage to buy a flat or a house, it is all very relevant knowledge. And in English or European languages, what happens in the back office of the bank is that they have automatic data extraction and solutions that get the key information out of these documents and then nicely summarize it and then potentially make an automatic decision whether you get a loan or not. Mm-hmm. This does not happen in local. So in Arabic speaking countries, for example, there's still a lot of manual back office tasks. So they actually send the document to someone who reviews it, potentially types it into an Excel form, and then it goes further, right? So we want to have the same data extraction capabilities for these languages too.
Hmm. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can only imagine how complex is the challenge, because nowadays we have amazing tools for like uh, big languages like English, but yeah, I can imagine how of a struggle it can be to just like knowing that 50% of this transcript might be wrong. That
Yeah.
just doesn't help at all. Um, yeah. So going from here, um, I'm thinking about the evolution of the field, because we have
Wow.
companies like OpenAI. I'm mentioning a lot OpenAI, but because I believe that they're pushing very strong on
Yeah.
like everything that is possible. Um, but so if you take your models and what you're doing today you're mainly doing text, speech to text, and you're offering different solutions, and you can deploy your models in different ways. You mentioned before on-prem and so on. um, Correct me if I say anything wrong, but what is your vision on the field, like the evolution of the field? Like, what
Yeah.
are you excited about? What do you think can be, I don't know if threatening, but like, what are you are there some updates in tech that you're excited about, and how do you see this field growing uh, forward in time?
Yeah. No, very, very good question. And um, yeah, I wish I knew everything, but I'm very excited to what's come, whatever will come. Right, I'm very excited about the
Hmm.
development. So what I find super fascinating, and again, OpenAI is one of the leaders in it, is what is called multimodal learning or
Right.
multimodal models, right? So GPT-4 can already process images and text, and that's really great. But what if we can also process audio, right? So when we can kind of have information input that comes from images, that comes from audio, that comes from text, and then I produce something related to that, right? So in a very advanced state, just imagine you take a picture of your room, you then speak to your phone to record it, and they, how would you design this room? What kind of interior design would you suggest, and what kind of furniture should I buy? And then it puts out it gives you a full room set up with all the different components that you should have in the room, plus maybe even a pre-loaded shopping cart on Amazon, right? Or stuff like that.
Hmm.
So it would just, first of all, make give more power to the user. Like we are not relying, not many people anyways, only super rich people would hire an interior designer. But imagine even for your garden, right? You take a picture of an empty field of grass, and you say, what would you suggest how my garden could look like? I want to have plants that are very easy to care for, that can resist in the winter cold of France or of Germany, but also the very beautiful in the summer. And then it gives you basically how it could look like with configurations of its descriptions of these plants and how to care for them. So that would be simply amazing, right? So we would have like so much more power as users. We could do so many more links. And yeah, I think there could be a huge value to it. So all that multimodality stuff, that is extremely fascinating. It's also obviously very challenging because you kind of need to have the same, always need to take context. So when you then speak to the engine or when you then speak to the model, you want to have, you wanted the model to understand the context. What is the image? You understand automatically how many square meters about has the garden and all of these things, right? Which are very challenging, obviously. So that's what I'm extremely excited about. And then secondly is a field what is called causal learning, so cause and effect relationship. And when you look like at large, right, um, all our deep learning models, at least most of the deep learning models, are still built on correlation. So you show for an image processing model, for example, you show a lot of images and you then say, okay, in that image is a car, in that image is a horse. And then you build basically a correlation as the connection between the label and the image, right? But what if we can actually have cause effect, right? So we all know that from computer vision models, they sometimes go horribly wrong, even if you introduce only a little bit of noise, right? So if we had a cause-effect relationship, we would actually not care about that noise. We would not care if there's a car and the horse in the same image, because we would have a reasoning and a cause and an effect. So yes, these two fields, so multimodal learning and causal learning, are, in my opinion, the two most exciting developments right now. Potentially they are combined at some point. I believe it would be first that we build multimodal correlation build models, and then potentially later on we introduce some causal learning in these multimodal models. This would be great. And beyond that, I can't think now, but it will be hugely, a huge progress for the kind of AI field.
Right. Right, I've been seeing amazing things lately. For example, OpenAI financed 5 million a car, autonomous cars company. I'm not sure of the name top of mind right now, but basically, what is fascinating is that, like you mentioned, like GPT-4 and the version after that, like they are multimodal, but they have a very interesting way of interpretation, let's say, of images. And like you said, that's super powerful. And so basically now for autonomous driving, we can have like two layers. We can have a high-end layer where we have a very advanced model that can kind of get the context of what's going on in an image, and maybe this model is running every X seconds, so that it have kind of an overall understanding. And then we have down all the layers of like concrete engineering things, like stopping the car and doing specific things, and combining those are very interesting. And so if I translate this knowledge to local languages, because all of this technology, we want to see it and apply it to not only English or big language where we have a lot of data around this, but we also want to have these reasoning capabilities to build with a local language. And so my question is, all of this model works very well in English, but I was thinking maybe like we can think of a framework of how to use maybe reasoning model in English in the background, but in the front using the models that you build, for example, for specific local language. And so like, do are those things that you consider? I mean, this is really state of the art, and I believe that everyone needs time to play around with these technologies. But like, do you envision implementing this in your projects, or like how do you see that?
Yes, very good question. And again, I'm not so sure actually. It's still very early in thinking about these things. In the end, we want, of course, but in the end, there's nothing better than knowing cause and effect and
Mm,
making prediction based on that, because it gives you in the end higher accuracy, and you won't have in an lens, you won't have hallucination anymore, right? Which is great. So stuff like that is definitely very important and very, it should be always at the front of our mind. It's still kind of early days in the development of causal learning, I'd say. And I'm unsure when it will be at that stage entirely. That's more or the very philosophical thought and exercise that we need to do. What does causality mean in language, right? Is causality actually not implicit in our language already? Because I'm never saying something because I have not seen it before, because I was not internally convinced that I need to say it, right?
mm,
So it is a very interesting question overall what causality means in language, and that is actually a brilliant PhD student at the moment who works at ETH in Zurich and at the Max Planck Institute in Tübingen on that topic. And it's very interesting what they propose. So what they found, for example, one thing is that when you take a data set that was originally in Spanish, then you translate it into English, the machine learning model will do better from Spanish into English than from English into Spanish. Again, like when the human translator created that translation, they had some cause effect, right? So Spanish was a cause, English was an effect. So it's all very, very interesting, and there's still a lot to learn, just how we think about the language and how we express ourselves to properly put that into a model.
Makes sense. And then I believe that with fine tuning, like, because when we're thinking that when we're thinking about those concepts, we might be thinking like on a very large picture. So we expect from those systems to work well on a series of different tasks. But if we then have specific use cases and we want to target specific things, I believe that once we have like one thing that is working pretty well, fine tuning those actions and those reasoning might be quite easy and quite powerful to making something that works, let's say 50% accuracy to something highly with a very, very high precision because of fine tuning and like taking into account those specific data and problem that we can face. And I wonder about like fine tuning on a multimodal level, like we fit images and text and audio, and maybe we can use all the three to like generate data from a data type to another. So those are very interesting things. But so if I come back to the local languages and the pains in the industry, so that's one thing that you consider. Now I would like to ask you about maybe if you have like, so you shared some use cases before. I would like to ask you about the implementations of those models and like how easier it will get in the future. So do you have some examples of how you implement those systems today and how it will be, how it might evolve in the futures, if it's all cloud, on-prem, or like you really adapt to anything, and how easy it's going to become to use those models?
Very good point. So when you just think of ease of use, everyone wants to have a cloud hosting, calling a simple API, and that's it, right?
Yeah.
And that's great for many customers that are happy with that. When it comes to kind of regulated industries or even all industries, for example, again, finance or something else, they are very often then, confronted with very strong data regulations or data ownership laws within a country, right? In Europe, we all know GDPR, right? In the UAE, for example, they have a law that data should not leave the country, right? So then, okay, what do we do? We can't really use a host, a cloud deployment that's in the US or in Europe somewhere because it needs to be hosted locally. So and they're conflicting, right? So they're conflicting interests. Once you want to have ease of use for companies, so companies can quickly innovate and can bring out new products. On the other hand, you want to have rightly very strong data regulations because, well, who knows what happens with the data, right? And when there are countries at war potentially in the future, you really don't want that your enemy has your data because they will know a lot of things about you. So this is all, a conflict overall, but we see that data regulation, so when data is actually hosted in the country, is what will be predominantly required over the next couple of years. And the cloud platforms like AWS, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, IBM, they catch up, right? Oracle, they build data centers within those countries because they are aware of very strong data regulation laws. And this helps massively for companies like us, right? Where we sell globally, And some countries like Saudi Arabia, as well as very strong data regulation laws. So luckily, there are now more and more data centers being built in Saudi Arabia, because then it's quite easy for international companies to step in and actually have their deployment on AWS or other providers.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. And so if I would like to push on this ethic regulation side, what else do you face regularly in terms of regulations or ethical problem
Yeah.
regarding building with local languages
Yeah.
models?
Regulations are definitely quite strong, especially in the Middle East, Asia, although it's not yet that strong. Africa also not that strong on data, ownership of data, privacy regulations. Ethical standards, we do take care of what kind of data we use to train and what are our models being used for in the end. So I give you one example, which I said at the CEO that we don't want to do it, was where a company, I obviously don't mention the name, wanted to have a dating platform in virtual reality, right? And it is obviously by itself a great idea. But what's the issue that they face is that they have a much, much larger proportion of male members than female members. And with our text-to-speech technology, they wanted to create fake female accounts. And this simply one of that, that's not going to happen, right? But not with me as CEO. Because, yeah, like the male man was something, no wonderful, a female is speaking to me, okay, realizing probably after a day or not very long, that's actually not a real female, it's just a fake account. So this is obviously very frustrating and potentially hurt emotionally as a human being. So we didn't want to do it. It was the consent across the company. Actually, well, I was not the only one who said that not what we want to engage in. So we need to assess what are our own ethical standards, what do we want to do and what we don't want to do. And sometimes, yeah, like ethics are above business performance, right? Above money. So you just really carefully assess each opportunity. And then you say, okay, do we want to do it? Do I not want to do it? For 99% of all use cases, it's a no-brainer where we say, okay, if they're going to analyze calls from a supermarket, well, there's absolutely no ethical concerns. When they do any additional kinds of installation, they keep track of all of the customer data themselves. Well, of course we do it, right? But there are these things that happen once in a while where we want to assess carefully whether we actually want to do it.
Right. And do you see that regulations in general? I am not too aware of like all the regulations in different zones, geographical zones, but does those regulations, broad regulations about data in general, assess these kind of ethical questions, or is it really depending on the principles of the company that is building these things to decide whether they want to do this specific task or not?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Like,
you went away.
Sorry. No, what it will is some of these regulations have ethical standards included as well. They are still right. They give guidelines, and it's honestly quite hard to actually control for those guidelines. Mm-hmm. But they definitely give guidelines, and we stick to those guidelines. And yeah, we obviously respect them as every other company does. But yeah, the majority or the concerning, the very carefully the aspects of these regulations that are need to be taken very careful and very seriously are besides the essay, the hosting, right? And also simply the customers that buy from us obviously use the technology in an overall platform which is then sold to another business or to another individual, and they don't want to lie to their customer. So they always, or some of them, say, okay, whatever data you process with us will be hosted in our own environment and will be totally secure, right? very often these are large companies that have been around for many years. So we don't want to risk to lose the reputation, especially about something as much in the media as data privacy, right? Everyone knows about these and so on. So that's what is most concerning, that ethical standards, we have say that, and we totally trust our partners as that they stick to these ethical standards.
Right. Thank you for sharing. And one of my last question before asking you, like the three little questions that I have at the end,
Yeah.
would be more regarding NLP challenges,
Yeah.
natural language processing challenges. So you are able to provide transcripts in local languages, and I found that this field is very interesting because it shows very, like, it can become very challenging fast, whereas if it was in English it wouldn't be a problem to do like specific things. So if I think, for example, I want to uh, get structured data from calls to just like kind of an idea of have an idea of what's going on in these calls, what have you seen working pretty well to use transcript and
Yeah.
convert it into structured data to like get some insights? Maybe this is too specific question, let me know, but I'm very curious in this task of using a transcript or unstructured data in text to like uh, get specific insights and metrics. Like, how do you go about this specifically in local
Yeah.
languages?
Yeah, very good. So overall, in terms of technology, what you apply then on the transcript are pure NLP tasks, right?
Hmm.
So what we very often apply is what's called entity recognition.
Right.
So for example, a customer like Nike wants to find out how are people thinking and what kind of questions do they ask in relation to a certain product, right? So let's assume I call Nike customer service and say, hey, my Nike Air Max 5 are broken after 2 months. The sole is losing already. I just bought them 2 months ago. And then the obviously takes it serious. And what will happen in the transcript is that we have trained an anti-recognition model on product names. So it will immediately detect Air Max 5, right? And this is very relevant knowledge because first of all, the quality assurance team at Nike will know why our customers calling, what kind of problem or what kind of product are they calling about. And then they can maybe even analyze the sentiment in relation to that product. So is it positive? Do I just call and say, hey, my Nike Air Max 5 are absolutely great. They're the best shoes that I ever had. Probably not, but then the sentiment will be positive. I probably call because I have a complaint, something doesn't go right as I expected. So this will be a negative sentiment. And then potentially, say even are more advanced, they also want to do then analysis, what kind of problems do customers have in relation to a result product. So I'm AT recognition directly for find MX5, then I potentially do intent classification or non-INT recognition on the surrounding of that MX5 when I mention the word. And then they can automatically analyze why customers are calling, what is their problem in relation to a certain product. And then really boils down to having, obviously, for the transcript, a very accurate speech to text that actually finds the product and correctly transcribes the product. And then I have an anti-recognition model in the local language and the intent classification model or sentiment analysis model in the local language. So it's not that different from building that workflow in English. It's just all in local languages. And what is important, what I always tell customers and what we do as a company is that things should not translate it back to English, because things will very often go wrong, especially from local languages into English. You still have very inaccurate translations, machine translations. I'm talking about, right? Automatic translation. So there are companies like Google Translate, DeepL, and others that do very, very advanced translations, but especially during a call when you don't follow perfect sentences, when you quickly interrupt different speakers, it's still quite hard actually to do accurate translation. So our anti-recognition models, our intent classification models, sentiment analysis models, all work in the local language and don't have any intermediate English translation stuff.
Makes sense. Very interesting. I wonder though, everything might be more challenging in local languages because maybe in English I can just call a transformer that does a very great sentiment analysis, including the latest models of OpenAI. I can just put transcripts without fine tuning and just have very specific prompts to then create a chain and retrieve like specific subjects, and I ask GPT-4 to like structure the data for me based on specific topics, and that works very very well. But in local languages, I would assume that each time we need to build our own data sets in the language based on the use cases, and kind of create our own models, or is there other ways or possibilities to use existing transformers?
There is probably, right? What is important to keep in mind, definitely GPT-4 will do extremely well when you just prompt it in the way, give me sentiment, put it out in a JSON format according to da. If you do a great job. Again, many of our customers want to tell their customers that your data is safe with us, your data doesn't leave our premises, right? So again, calling GPT-4 will probably be not okay for most of our customers. And this is what I believe happens across many different. You can deploy obviously a very powerful open source LLM or an LLM that you train yourself on premise of the customers. However, very often it's a bit overkill, right? So what kind of infrastructure do you need to deploy an LLM that is giving you response not 20 minutes later, gives you a response within 1-2 minutes, right? You need like massive GPU setup. This would obviously bite the cloud consumption or bite the local infrastructure budget quite well. And then if it's really necessary, can we actually not do, say, with a very specialized model that is a million times smaller and gives you, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2% less accuracy? Most customers, they probably, that's what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot. So last questions, 3 last questions. They're pretty short. The first one being, how do you keep up to date with latest technologies and advancements and so on, and how do you keep learning?
Yeah. How I keep up to date, I still try to read a lot. So there is one really, really great researcher that I follow. His name is Sebastian Odo. He specifically works in local language NLP, and that's why I'm so interested. But he writes a newsletter, comes up by email every other month, also, and really summarizes with great contributions. He goes to all the well-known NLP conferences, and very often also post-conference kind of his own highlights or the highlights all over the local language NLP. And that's what I follow quite a lot. He's also a great guy, a great researcher, although he also does lots of very good work with that, but he all has that similar newsletter coming out every other month. Otherwise, I do still scroll a lot on Twitter and LinkedIn, so I follow obviously people that I find produce great work. So there's also, for example, the Microsoft research team in India, absolutely phenomenal in terms of papers and projects that they work on. I follow them quite closely, and luckily I do know now a couple of people in that industry overall, right? So either I meet them or I follow them, and then I keep myself up to date. By no means I get to know everything that's going on. There's probably too much going on for everyone to keep up to date.
Yeah.
But we also need to be, I find it very important to be like critical of what's coming out. Right? It's given like archive and preprints, it's not that difficult to publish anymore, but is it actually properly assessed again, current state of the art? Is it proper evaluation, or do I get 0.5% accuracy improvement because I was just training them on long enough, and by chance of random it gets a bit higher, right? Yeah. So you really need to have a critical eye when you keep it there with updates. but reading, that helps. Yeah.
Awesome. So where can people reach out to you? So you mentioned LinkedIn, Twitter. Like, how can they learn
That's,
more about you or reach out?
you know, easiest is LinkedIn, to be honest. I'm sometimes on Twitter, but I don't find the direct messages so useful and so intuitive on Twitter. So LinkedIn is an easy way, by email. So my email is felix@neuralspace.ai. Very simple email, so just drop me a line. And yeah, otherwise, whenever I'm at conferences, I normally post something on LinkedIn, so just hit me up. Always happy to have the chat.
Amazing. And last question, would you have a message for the Let's Talk AI community? It can be personal, it can be professional, it can be regarding the fields. You decide.
Yeah, there are multiple messages I find. Um, I find the field sometimes gives certain technologies and certain approaches very, very fancy and um, very special names, like deep learning itself, then hallucination, reinforcement learning, continual learning. All of these are actually very fancy names. And what I saw myself when I first started in university learning about this concept, it's actually not that complicated. So there are actually very often some quite simple underlying structures, and I got a bit scared of by all these really fancy names. So even when it sounds like overwhelming, or when someone with a PhD has proposed it, still believe in yourself and still try to learn about it, because it's very often not as complicated as it sounds like. Secondly, what is probably my biggest learning is that don't rely on scientific papers as your main input source, because they're very often written in a very academic language that is not so easily understandable. And you also don't have really a chance to ask the person to explain something in more detail, right? So whenever you can listen to calls, whenever you can listen to podcasts, when you can actually go live to a presentation about something, I would always prefer that, because people express how they speak is much, much different to how they write, especially in academic language. And then you still have a chance to ask questions afterwards, right? So this makes sense. I understood concepts not at all through the paper that I went to one presentation from somewhere on YouTube, a presentation by that person about that topic, and it suddenly all made sense. So it's just much easier to understand from a direct view interaction.
Awesome. Thanks for these tips. And there are amazing podcasts out there, just naming
Yes.
two that I really like, Cognitive Revolution and let's Latent Space. Both two podcasts that I really enjoy and that really match what you're saying. Thanks a lot, Felix, for coming on the show. I had an amazing time, learned a lot, and I wish you to have a wonderful day.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me, Thomas.